Welcome back, Vinyl Community. Reggae Spotlight time again. Today looking at the man called Keith Slim Smith, called one of Jamaica's greatest singers. It's one of his signature songs here called My Conversation, originally issued around 1968. All I need from you is a good conversation. That soaring high tenor of Slim Smith, deeply emotional. Love your brothers, my friends. Love your sisters. With that one turn of a lyric, changing a deeply romantic song into something a bit more spiritual, more universal, kind of a trademark of Slim Smith's. That song with its distinctive piano refrain would be the music track of it, or what's called the rhythm, would be versioned over and over again in Jamaica for many other songs, becoming actually one of the most reused rhythm tracks. Originally released by Slim Smith in 1968. Not a whole lot of biographical information about Slim Smith out there. I was actually inspired to do this video by this recent pickup, Memorial. This is a posthumous compilation released around 1973 on the Trojan label. Picked this up from Vinyl Community member Rob, aka Vinyl 79, which kind of gave me the idea to do a bit of a retrospective on what I have for Slim Smith. Slim Smith went to Kingston Secondary School, grew up in Kingston, Jamaica. One of his friends was another up-and-coming aspiring singer named Jimmy Riley. Jimmy Riley was actually the subject of one of my very first Reggae Spotlight videos. The two of them would be lifelong friends. By the early 1960s, the sound of ska was in full swing as Jamaica's recording industry kicked into full gear. Ska, with its driving rhythms and heavy brass sections, would be the sound that would take Jamaican music to an international level initially, before there was ever a concept of what's called reggae now. In this time, Slim Smith joined a group called the Techniques, a harmony group. These sort of harmony groups with several vocalists would be the main vehicle for Jamaican music through the 60s and 70s, especially as the influence of US soul grew. American music was always an influence on Jamaican music. They were tuned into radio stations broadcasting out of New Orleans with that influence of jump blues, swing, early R&B showing up in the very earliest sides recorded in Jamaica. But as the 60s wore on, the sound of soul grew increasingly more influential, especially the three-man harmony template laid down by Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions would make a huge impression on Jamaican music, and Slim Smith was no exception. After a few years, he left the Techniques. It was reportedly around 1966. Legend has it, in that year, the summer was so hot, it was too hot for people to dance to those driving ska rhythms. So they had to slow the tempo down. The brass sections moved more to the background. Rhythm moved more to the forefront. And these harmony groups were proliferating all over the island. Countless harmony groups, which would continue through the 60s, well into the 70s. And the Techniques were one of the groups at the top of the heap. Slim Smith soon left. These groups all had kind of fluid memberships at the time. He initially formed his own group called the Uniques, which revolved around himself, Franklin White, and another singer called Roy Shirley, who would have a solo career. This lineup kind of didn't last too long. They kind of all went solo. Slim Smith began recording some sides for Clement Dodd, C.S. Dodd's Studio One label. Recorded several classic songs. Just for example, these appear on a lot of compilations. This one's called Best of Studio One from the Heartbeat label, released in the early 1980s. This includes his Born to Love, Slim Smith. Studio One would also issue an LP by Slim Smith, wouldn't be released until much later. It's kind of the habit at the time for Studio One. Born to Love after that song by Slim Smith. Following this, Slim would return to the Uniques, now with a lineup of himself, his old friend Jimmy Riley, and another friend called Lloyd Charmers, who would have a long career as a solo artist himself, as well as a producer. And this is the classic lineup that would record many iconic songs of the period, the rock steady period, it's called. That brief window of time from about 1966 to 1968, where a fantastic amount of incredible music was recorded in Jamaica before the actual reggae rhythm kind of took over from around 1968 on. The Uniques only released one LP during their lifespan, their initial lifespan of this classic lineup, but they've appeared on many compilations. This one appeared on the Pressure Sounds label in 1998 actually. Watch This Sound, that was reportedly one of their first hits. Watch This Sound was adapted from the Buffalo Springfield song For What It's Worth, done in more of a Jamaican soul style. This compilation also includes My Conversation, also Gypsy Woman, which was a cover of the Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions song. That would be done a couple of times in reggae. Gypsy Woman, and People Get Ready, Rocksteady. Any song with the word rocksteady in the title is usually a safe bet. I always love those. As another compilation appeared on Pressure Sounds a bit later, 2010, 12 years later. Absolutely Rocksteady, the Uniques. There's the classic lineup of the Uniques right there, with Slim Smith in center with his good friends. Classic songs on here. People Rocksteady's on there again. This Feeling. You Lied to Me, showing that wounded romanticism of Slim Smith. He was a singer who put everything into his performances, very emotional, not tied up in any kind of machismo of the time. Put all his emotions, all his vulnerability out there, all his insecurities would show up in these lyrics, and just everything out there. Even described as almost borderline histrionic, some of his performances. He had a deeply impetuous romantic nature, which was recorded in lyrics as the song Blinded by Love, written by Jimmy Riley for Slim, in which the narrator kind of says, all my friends tried to warn me, not a word did I heed. It's kind of a rueful look at his impetuous romantic nature, falling in love, getting his heart broken. And this has another Curtis Mayfield cover on the flip, Closer Together. Just a Dream would be credited just to Slim Smith. While continuing with the Uniques, started to record some solo sides. He recorded a solo LP which appeared on the Palma label in the late 60s, I believe, in the UK. Just a Dream would also appear on various labels. This is on the Clock Tower label, early pressing, still in shrink. Unfortunately, the track list on this is completely messed up, doesn't match what's on the record at all. But except for one track, it is all Slim Smith and all good. It's also on many compilations, particularly where Bunny Lee is concerned. Bunny Lee compilations usually will have some Slim Smith or Uniques, but the absolute iconic double shot of Slim Smith and the Uniques career was that My Conversation song, which was originally issued on the Lee's label as a 7-inch, backed with another classic iconic song called The Beatitude. Here it is on the Attack label, another Bunny Lee label. The Beatitude was adapted from the lyrics of the Sermon on the Mount from the Bible, showing Slim Smith's increasingly spiritual side. This was a direction he was going in as he started moving, as he left the Uniques and started moving more in a solo direction. Unfortunately, in 1972, he began experiencing what was described as erratic or paranoid behavior. He was incarcerated in Kingston's Bellevue Mental Hospital for a time. When he got out, continued recording for Bunny Lee. Apparently, he was going in an increasingly political direction, influenced by the U.S. soul Black Power movement, which was not at all uncommon for singers of his generation in reggae, which was going in an increasingly conscious direction. Apparently he wanted his next LP to have more of a dread theme, and indeed the last known photo of Slim Smith shows him in looking in a not very healthy state. And apparently the last song he ever recorded was called "The Time Has Come," or was ever released in his lifetime. What happened was in 1973, Slim Smith was out with friends. They were having a good time, smoking some ganja. He came home late to his parents' house one night. The house was locked up. He could not gain access, so he broke a window to try and unlock the door and get inside. Unfortunately, he severely lacerated his arm and bled to death on the pavement outside before help could arrive, which brought an end at the young age of 25 to one of the greatest voices Jamaica's ever produced, who would undoubtedly have recorded many classic sides in years to come. So that is my look at Slim Smith. I'm going to leave you with that last song called "The Time Has Come." Thanks for watching, guys. Peace, Final Community.